Okay, so let's actually record the conversation instead of having a conversation and then turning the recording on and then having it again.
No, no. So yes, we were talking about. We were just talking. So screw it.
Yeah.
Just
Oh, don't do the podcast introduction stuff.
No, professionals. PPs. No, PPs. That was gone years ago.
Was that ever a thing? Were we ever podcast professionals?
No,
We
probably
we
not.
we don't spend £500 on a microphone and then ask really expensive guests really boring questions. Carry on.
You won't look at my microphone, and that's fine. My microphone isn't £500, but it's not cheap. But anyway,
Yeah.
So we were kind of talking about. Well, I was talking about my experience of going through the ecological psychology paper that has just been available. Well, book. It is a book, isn't it? Yes.
It's like 300 pages. It's a
Okay,
book.
yeah. It is a big. It's a big. Hang on. Are we thinking about different things?
We might be thinking about different. I'm thinking about Miguel's and Vicente's. I haven't looked at it, but I'm pretty sure it's like 200 plus pages plus references.
Supposedly it's only 92.
Really? Did they?
According to Zotero, I have it open and it's 24 of 92.
To be fair, I have downloaded far too many sources recently, so I might be thinking of another source. But I mean,
Hmm.
90 is still a book. It's just a short book.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And I recognized some gaps in my expertise. And it was really interesting considering at the same time I was finishing off my section of our WTF is ecological psychology. And in this book, they're actually talking about the history of where it stemmed from.
Yeah.
You look like you're
Yeah, no, I
yeah.
just figured it out. So what you were referring to, Miguel and Vicente's book, that's 92 pages. But what I was thinking about was, oh, it's the lectures on perception by Turvey. What's his first name? Michael Turvey. There we go.
Hmm.
Lectures of Perception from Michael Turvey. That's 447 pages. That's what I was thinking when I said 300 plus. But yeah, and then we got the Ecological Psychology from Cambridge Elements. That's 92
Yes.
pages. Ecological Psychology Introduction, Julia and Jeff. That's 300 pages. Then I've got other books as well I'm going through. So yeah, that's why I was like, oh, it's 200 plus pages because that's what most of my books are at the moment.
Yeah, this is a little short one. Yeah, so I've been going through it and I noticed some gaps in my expertise, and it was interesting to go just to go back through the history because I don't think I've read anything regarding the history of eco. Like I've touched on little bits, and it's been here and there, and
Like
I
the
knew there
philosophy
was.
history or
Yeah, I think it would be classed as the philosophy, like where it stems from, where I don't know, and
like William
where the
James, James
Gibson.
Gibson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like where it all kind of started as such. And it was interesting just to go through that and go, oh, that's interesting, cool. So I quite enjoyed the kind of link to obviously Gestalt,
So
which I was like, yeah, an ecological Gestalt. I found that a little bit tantalizing just hearing an ecological Gestalt. Okay,
I
interesting.
I find it mildly interesting that obviously when we went to Berlin, that was that was in the first session. It was like the first half an hour of the first session, but they blitzed through it. So if you weren't familiar, you yeah, old guy, another old guy, great. Oh,
Yeah, I
women.
remember those. I remember that conversation, but it was not, I don't know, maybe it's the exact same information, but just reading through it and kind of,
It's a bifurcation.
yeah, it was really interesting to go through it. I'm just like, oh, yeah, cool, this is interesting. Because I knew some of the history from Berlin, but that was my only like experience of that was
It's the
through
first
that
point of contact,
very,
yeah.
very short, tiny, I think it was 5 minute long bit. And it was interesting just to read it in a different context and go through it. And it's like, oh, cool, cool. And as of course, part of the article with co-writing, co-authoring, whatever you want to call it,
Mm.
I do mention Gestalt
Yeah.
because that's how I got from cognitive Gestalt, even though they're kind of
Yeah.
still, yeah, to ecological.
So I want to ask you something. This may go a little sideways. When you say
Oh, God.
cognitive, I think we need a different name for cognitive. In the book, Julia and Jeff write, they call it traditional, and I don't think that's entirely accurate.
Yeah, that I keep using cognitive, even though this is actually a we're still talking about cognition,
Yes.
even as ecological psychologists. So I suppose, yeah, what is a bet and traditional I don't like.
Me either. I don't like the word traditional, but it makes the most sense when you consider all the other alternative words.
Yeah.
um,
I do kind of move between the cognitive and traditional approach.
I the cognitive approach to me just really misrepresents what it is that we're talking about. Because when, as ecological psychologists, we are talking about cognitive science. We are
Yeah.
cognitive scientists. It's not
Yes.
that the brain isn't involved, it's we think it's involved in a different way. It's still cognitive science. So
Yeah.
I feel like saying the cognitive versus ecological has a misconception embedded within that comparison.
Mm. Mm. But what's a better alternative apart from traditional, which still
I,
the
I mean,
information processing approach, the IP approach, but then you've got to try. I don't know what the fuck's that.
that's the thing. Like information processing
The
isn't the same.
popular approach.
Yeah, but then when ecological becomes popular, how do you then talk about it? Because if we're talking in skill acquisition, the popular approach might be ecologically driven. So popular is sample size dependent. And when you consider information processing, is that the same as predictive processing? Not really. Is that the same as active inference? Well, not really. But they're
Yeah.
all under the same umbrella where you have predictive rather than prospective. But predictive and prospective isn't a way to compare the traditional cognitive approach to ecological approaches because,
Okay.
as I tweeted this morning, everyone uses constraints. It's the reason of using the constraints that, for me, changes whether it's the constraints-led approach or just adding a constraint. So it's the goal direction towards self-organization rather
Mm.
than instruction. But now we're not
Yeah.
talking about theory. Now we're talking about practice.
Yeah, that's some of the things that I've been kind of move like I love talking about the theory because it's fun, but it is the practice that I feel myself drawn more and more and more to the practice of it. To like, okay, cool. So we have this approach, direct perception. What of it? Like, what about it? Like,
Why
what
do
do
I
we do?
care?
Why do we care? What should we do? And that's kind of where I'm like playing in now. And it was interesting, kind of rewinding and also not current future.
I was about to say that.
I know. Um, as I was going through this, I was like, okay, cool. All right. So there's bits that I've missed. Well, not necessarily missed. I don't think it's missed. That's not quite the right.
You haven't attuned to.
Yeah, that I haven't attuned to. That it's actually like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. This, yeah, okay, cool. That's where this is, and that's where that is.
Did you have an aha moment?
Yes.
Then you were at a critical state within the fractal timescales at which we measure. Oh, sorry, I had to do it, you know?
I was like, okay, cool. How do we use that? So here's a question for you. How do we use fractal states and critical states and fractal?
The fact that you asked that question is like that just epitomizes the whole struggle with communicating the theory to practice because you can't use fractals. Fractals
Mm.
is a way to conceptualize the different scales at which we are measuring something.
But what are we measuring and why do we care?
That's the point of fractals. That when you say fractals, you can measure something with a meter ruler, centimeter ruler, millimeter ruler, and depending on what ruler you have, will change the performance metric. Why that matters is, well, you can now apply that to practice by saying, okay,
Mm.
this practice, I'm going to use a meter ruler. I'm going to use a centimeter ruler. I'm going to use a millimeter ruler. I'm going to use a miles ruler. And what you decide to measure with therefore changes the goal directed behavior because now your performance measure changes. Most people, when they measure performance, there are stipulations and what you shouldn't do. So, for example, in academia, you can't, or you shouldn't at least, do certain things because it's going to bias the results. Well, that is a factor that needs to be considered in all of those rulers that you're using? Are you going to have a really narrow ruler to say, okay, we're going to constrain you in this lab, you're not going to move, and you're just going to think about this one specific task, and we're going to measure this one specific thing, which will give us brain activation? That is a fractal measurement, which I would
Mm.
argue is extremely ineffective and ecologically invalid, which is
Yeah, so
where the fractal conversation comes in. When we're looking for practice, ecological validity typically will increase as you go up those fractal timescales, which is what we as ecological psychologists are doing. We are using higher level fractal timescales and potentially lower level as well to an extent, but we don't want to get into the nitty gritties of everything. We are looking at the organism environment relationship, higher
yeah.
timescales. Well, fractal
So,
scales technically.
so would the traditional
The
cognitive,
traditional cognitive approach, we'll go with that
yeah,
for the moment.
yeah, the traditional cognitive, yeah,
Easy for you to say.
TCA.
Yeah.
So does the TCA use would you say uses a smaller fractal?
I'm going to get you to answer that question.
Because that's where I'm like, yes, because it's zooming right in on the brain. Because the brain is everything, and it does everything, and neurons and shit we don't actually understand, but we're pretending we understand.
Yeah. That's
That's
the way
that's where I got to.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Because when you look at, say I'm trying to use the coastline as an example because the British coastline is the way fractals are typically explained. If you take the one edge of Britain's, or any coastline, to be honest, you take, or a rock face, you take an edge and you stick a ruler on it. There's going to be bits that go backwards and the bits that sort of jaggedy edges. So I guess a rock face isn't entirely accurate because in theory you'd put the ruler where you've got bits that are going both sides. So if
Mm.
you look down at a map, I've got a map on my thing, on my desk. If you look down at your map and you put a line across an edge, there are some bits that are going to go in front of the edge, some gaps are going to go behind the edge, but you've given it a rough average of how long that edge is going to be, because you would sort of work out and say, okay, well that little hole there is filled up with that little sort of out bit over there, so you can sort of like wrap it together. The
Mm.
ecological approach just says, okay, let's dump a big ruler on it. Go, yeah, that's it. That's the whole thing because there's so much going on here. The traditional cognitive approaches will go, actually, no, because we need to look at the distance of that one and that one and that one, which is where they start separating out parts. And then we go, okay, well, now we need to measure that one and that one and that one. And this is where the fractality comes in, because no matter how far you zoom in, there is always going to be ins and outs of that coastline. There's always going to be bits that don't quite match that line that you've drawn of averages. And this is where, when you look at measuring performance, reading Rob Gray's book recently, How We Learn to Move, his first one, he was discussing how golf performance was measured. The
Mm.
angle of the elbow and the shoulder and the hips and everything like that. And when you take an average of all those performers, you get degrees. But no one elite performer had all of those things because it was an average. It was the ruler put across all of these different people, and you're like, well, there's roughly this thing. What the traditional cognitive approach looks to do is go, well, this ruler isn't good enough. We need to look at everything else. We need to look at all of the different angles in there. And then once we've got all of those angles, every person needs to do that thing. And you're like, no.
And then you just get stuck in this continuous looking at the tiny details and missing all of the context on the
Precisely. You go further and further and further in, and eventually you're looking at it and going, I have a nanometer scale ruler, and it means fuck all because it doesn't represent what I'm doing at all. And because when you zoom out, you can't see the nanometer ruler, but you might be measuring to that scale.
yeah.
And that's where the ecological approach goes, hey, you know that scale we've been looking at? Let's zoom out a bit rather than zooming in, which is
And if we kind of relate it back to like where we began of things like Notion and our tools and the tech,
Mhm.
like so much is zoomed in on the tool itself and the habit formation and the all of these things we have to do, the focus, we've got to focus. But what we're focusing on is trying to focus. So we're zoomed in on that nanometer of focus instead of seeing the the well, the gestalt, if you wish, the all of the system and the environment and how we're interacting between each other
Mhm.
and what we're doing and seeing. Because I was I was talking to a client the other day around migrating a course from one platform to another, and they were like, "Well, when should I do it? Should I change the course that I'm designing now and create and like update it, make it better, make it because they're not happy because the course they're building is not really a course; it's a dynamic environment to explore a topic." And so I'm like, well, it doesn't really matter. Yes, you could do it now, but you're going to move platforms, and if you're going to move platforms, you're going to have different constraints and you're going to have different opportunities for your clients. So you could change it now, sure, but you're going to go and change it all over again. Do you wish to do that twice? Like, and the answer was no. And I'm like, cool. You have different capabilities in that app, like very different. You have multiple layers and lovely little things.
I feel like that is the biggest lesson that I've learned applying this ecological psychology is it's not doing anything new or abstract or this brand new revolutionary radical thing. It's a case of educating attention and intention for the specifying information and then calibrating that to help us do whatever it is that we want to do. And
Because all of the stuff, well, a lot of the stuff, to not use, yeah,
encapsulating terms, yeah.
encapsulating terms, like a lot of the options in the productivity world are fine.
Hmm.
Like they can work in a very, micro nano fractal, as the case may be. But often nobody seems to zoom out again, or few people seem to zoom back out again to see the whole, well, the environment organism shit, which is
I
the bit that's kind of missing. So you can have your time blocking and like, for example, like I do what you do now, which is basically time blocking, except I suppose it would be the intention around that.
what do you mean?
Well, I now know why I'm doing it,
Oh
and
yeah.
kind of like I now have my attention on that. It's like it's not a fixed thing because I don't need to. It's I hate the word mindset shift.
You were
Ew.
educating your intention.
Yeah, educating my intention of like, okay, cool. So this is like a 3 hour block. Do I have to fill it all with the stuff? No, but I am. It was interesting, like going on to me finishing off the WTF is ecological
Ecopsych.
ecopsych. Yeah, what WTF is ecopsych. When I first kind of, as I was going through it during the period of time, I had blocks in, but I couldn't get it out, and then life, because that's all there, kind of got in the way, and I was trying to get it done. And it was quite different. Yesterday, I was like, okay, cool. This is my 3 hour block that I've put in there on EcoPsych and getting it done and finishing it off. And I'm like, I want to deliver this today. That was my intention of like, Danny's waiting long enough. I may not be able to do much for the rest of this week because I've got my appointment tomorrow. So today is the day. And so it was very much, let's just sit down and do it. My original assumption was I would sit, look at Obsidian, and it would all happen. No.
So I guess working through, how did you get it done?
Yeah, I was going there. I thought it'd be quite interesting to do that. How did I get it done? The simple answer was I got out of my own way because I recognized that I was like, okay, there is a certain way that this final paragraph had to be. I needed to use the jargon. I needed to use this. I needed to use that. Like I had added a bunch of constraints and assumptions that I needed to have. And then as I was kind of going through it, and then I started, during my 3 hour period, I stopped writing because I wasn't actually writing. I was just looking at the screen.
Mm.
And then I started reading the ecological psychology book. And then as I was going through that, I was like, okay, cool, cool. And then I kind of got to a point of like, oh, guitar.
Mm.
Because it was a really good example of like the ecological approach in practice. And it was really tangible. And I also knew you would have the theory covered. I'm like, chances are he's going to take this and go, yes, and this is this and this is. So I was like, I don't need to do the theory necessarily, because a lot of what I do, and I recognize that through writing this, is like a lot of what I do is I'm more focused on the practice. I like the theory, but it is secondary to the practice for me.
Mhm.
Like
The theory
I
underpins the practice.
yeah, the theory underpins the practice. And I could continue to keep researching and diving deep and doing all these things. And it would be not, would I enjoy it? Yeah, absolutely. But also, I want to just do stuff. And so when it comes up that actually I'm going to read it, like it is that education of intention, I think you said. Like my intention was not to research. My
Mm.
intention is to do things, like
Yep.
to take action and move forward, because I do have a constraint of time. Well, we all do, but like I have
Yeah.
I have family responsibilities and other loads of things that reduce that capacity, I suppose, all those opportunities.
You, the affordances you're perceiving has changed because of the time constraints and
Yeah.
the when we say time constraints, time is obviously a constraint. It's always a constraint, but time is also impacted by other task constraints. Task constraints being other people needing you.
Yes. And there is always a need for me.
Mhm.
And so being able to be available to that and still finish things off means, oh, I don't get to sit and read really cool research papers because, one, I want to do things.
That to me that to me sums up why I don't like writing as a, oh, I'm going to write now. Because for me, when you were saying, oh, well, I was just looking at the screen, that's still writing because writing is thinking. And when you
Yes.
went to read the book, that to me is still writing because you're
Yeah.
thinking about writing.
That was one of the things that I got, was I was genuinely like, after all, and at first I was like, oh, I'm so distracted and I'm doing these things and I'm thinking, and then I was like, yeah, but I'm not distracted, am I? Because I have been all this time, even though I am not sat writing this, I have been thinking about it.
Mm.
I haven't stopped thinking about it. I haven't stopped writing. And so I kind of just got myself into a position. And it's like it was difficult to be able to go, look, I'm not going to get this until next week. You're just not going to have it because I can't, because I'm needed everywhere. It's half term
No.
things.
Yeah.
And I found that difficult to just go, yeah, I don't think I can. And then I was like, yeah, but this is this is I could force myself to sit
Yeah.
down,
No,
but it
I'm
wouldn't.
I'm intrigued. Why did you find it difficult?
To
Did
say
you feel
that,
pressure by me? Yeah.
I didn't feel pressured by you, but it was the act of failing to deliver what I said I would. It's all my nonsense.
Yeah, I know, but
And then I was like, hang
that's
on a minute.
interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And then as I kind of said, I remember I was thinking about our experiences and the time we actually spent in person together, and you are the most chill person that I've ever met. It was infuriating. It was like, yeah, sure. Like, plan. Whereas I'm naturally quite yeah,
Particular
because
person.
yeah, I'm a very particular person, and at home that is where I'm at most of the time. It's trying to keep things moving. It's making sure everyone's okay and moving forward. And I didn't do that at all. I
Mm.
tried, but it didn't really matter. It was like, yeah, sure. Okay, cool. It was really good, because then I thought back to that experience and was like, actually, I'll just say what's happening and there would be absolutely zero problem. And there wasn't. It was like, yeah, cool. And then you just checked in to see if it was like what was going on and how it was. And I'm like, yeah, it's coming today because I wanted to bring it in. And that was I didn't want to keep putting it off and putting it off and keep, well, putting it off, but I wasn't really putting it off.
Mm.
I assumed I was putting it off. Really, I was still writing, just not pen to, well, not fingers to keyboard, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that to me is really interesting because as you mentioned, I'm fairly chill. And even though it may not come across as fairly chill because I do speak rather quickly for some people,
Mm.
and I do seem to go full steam ahead. And when people say, "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm writing this, I'm writing this, I'm editing this, and I'm working on this, and I'm doing this, this, and this today." And if people go, "What? How are you doing all of that? Oh my God, you're so busy. You do blah blah blah." I'm like, No, it's just this what I'm currently working on because you're the way I see it now, at least, is you're always thinking about a variety of things. There's
Yes.
variation, and you don't stop. So even though on my calendar I have 5 projects currently, one, two, three, 6 projects, I'm actually doing far more than 6 because I'm working on so many other projects inside of my Obsidian. I would probably say I'm actively thinking about 120, 130 projects simultaneously because as soon as a source comes up, I can relate the information to the information. Like I watched a podcast episode this morning, the Constraints-Led Approach CLA 2024 from Rob Gray that came out 3 hours ago. I watched that this morning. Yes, that's what I do when I wake up. And when I was watching that, I was thinking, okay, that could relate to the CLA essay, but that could also relate to the TGFU essay, not relating to CLA. But that could also relate to the books that I'm writing, the How We Learn to Move book and the Learning to Optimize Movement book. So that's 4 different projects that is, I guess, being resurfaced from one source. And while I'm listening to the source, I'm also thinking about early specialization, early diversification, deliberate practice, differential learning, because it's all related. They are all related topics. So
Mm.
I'm thinking about 20 different projects through one source. Am I actively working on them all? I would argue yes. But do I have time set aside for me to complete the goal? No. I have goal directed behaviors. I want to do better
Yes.
at XYZ, but the measurable goal that I've set, the arbitrary deadline that I've set myself, the competition date, the match date, the practice end time, the publish date of the article, that is what I put on my calendar. But
Mm.
everything else I'm always thinking. So when people say, or, well, when you were saying, "Oh, you seem so chilled," I'm like, well, yeah, because I've been thinking about this for a year, 2 years, 5 years. What's the rush?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's like, the always thinking about lots of things. That, all of that. As I've been thinking, so we've been discussing going that way a little bit, as we do.
Lateral.
Yeah. I am I am equally also thinking about a good couple of hundred things and a couple of hundred projects as I'm doing all of the actual projects in Obsidian and more good. It's like I was just as you were talking, I was thinking about my son, and one thing I do want to talk about today, which we'll get into. Did you know there is a new type of memory?
There's always a new type of memory.
I just and I hate because
But,
they spoke about it in
but
school today.
they spoke about it in school.
Yes, yes.
He's in primary school.
No, secondary.
Oh, yeah, he just started secondary, didn't he?
He did just start secondary, and yeah, it was quite hilarious because he came home slightly giggling because he went. We had an assembly today about punctuation, and we were talking about memory and short-term memory, and I just he knew what would happen when he mentioned short-term memory because I can't keep my gob shut. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, no! Can we stop it? Which is a common joke now. Everyone's being very careful not to mention it in front of me because it's so funny.
I think that sets up the culture. That sets up the environment. That's what change. That's what triggers change. It's not the talking in the small bits over. No, it's I don't want to use that word. I don't want to use that term. I'm going to
And
do something.
and Hayden turned around and said, "I've only put my hand up and said my daddy would think you're talking nonsense." And there's a part of me that went, "Why didn't you?" I'm like, "Good, because this needs to be spoken about
Yeah.
because it's so."
I would love it I'm just thinking if he had said that and the teacher goes, "Well, I should talk with your dad," and then you go in and say, "Right, I don't think working memory, short-term memory are the ways that we should explain how we remember things. Because I would imagine the teacher was the head teacher if it was an assembly.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, so that's the top of the school.
Oh,
That's the
that's
that's the that's the top
best.
of a secondary
And
school being
she's
challenged.
really good. Resists urge to send email.
Because I mean, this is part of my hope, fingers crossed hope, within towards the end of this year, I can start not influencing isn't the accurate word, but exposing, I guess, the ecological approach to more head teachers to at least expose the ideas in schools. Because at the moment it's very regimented in working memory, long-term memory, short-term memory, that memory model. But there is an alternative approach here.
Yeah. And I don't remember the stupid. There was a curve about forgetting. I can't remember
The
the.
forgetting curve, the
Yeah,
Ebbinghaus forgetting curve.
that's the one. And they mentioned the Ebbinghaus, and I went, oh, fuck off.
What's ironic? What's ironic is the Ebbinghaus curve forgetting because
No, it's not. It's a.
you know, when you look at the data, it comes down, but there's a blip, so it goes up and then goes back down again. So it's not actually a curve when you look at the data. And the original studies show that there is a blip, and they talk about the blip. They even say this blip could be due to, and then give other possibilities because of potential alternatives to remembering. They don't actually talk about ecological psychology and remembering and processing, etc. But they say, well, this isn't linear. And you're like, well, if this curve isn't this nice explanation of all the data, etc., etc., maybe there's something else. But people still use the Ebbinghaus curve as an example of forgetting over time. You're like, okay. But reading the cognitive psychology handbook, they even say in the cognitive psychology handbook that, hey, we remember things and it could just be one instance. So where's the forgetting curve in that? If you have a significant event, you're not going to forget it. It's not like oh, yeah, I broke my leg. Wait, when did I do? No, you know when you broke your leg and you couldn't walk for months.
My partner made a fantastic comment, and I'm like, I am creating ecological psychologists without them realizing. Because as we were talking about the forgetting thing and etc., and Aidan was exploring that, we were just chatting, because that's what we do on a Monday evening.
Hmm. I wish I could be in a similar situation. My parents do not give two shits.
And Tori just went, yeah, but if you forget things, how are you forgetting something? Because you know that something is gone. So are you forgetting? And I'm like, fucking exactly.
That is the point I'm trying to get across.
That is the point I'm trying to get across. And this morning, she
Because
asked
you
me,
need to know that you've forgotten something for there to have been something to have forgotten. Otherwise, you wouldn't have known it in the first place. Yeah.
and
So
then this morning, Tori asked, so when you're doom scrolling and you remember to do something and then you go and do it, but then as soon as you stop doom scrolling, you forget. Do you go back to doing it again and then you remember it again? I'm like, yes. Oh, okay. Because environment,
mhm.
it's all there.
Attunement of information.
It's just there. Like I just need to attune to it. So as I go back to the scrolling, something happened there that made me think about that, and I wanted to do that, so I go do that.
Yep.
Meaning it's the whole thing of like, oh, I just forget everything, so I can't do things, and I can't. Cool, then you're fucked. That's basically it. If you assume that, then you're fucked. I have a bad memory. Okay, then you're fucked for the rest of your life.
Mhm. Remembering is the stabilization of attractor states, which emerges through organism environment relationships, which means that if you go back to your phone, you are now stabilizing the attractor state, which means you're more likely to emerge whatever behavior it is that you wanted to do in the first place, because that matches your real world experience. Obviously, I'm preaching to the choir here, but
Yeah, pretty much. And that it's just exciting that those questions are happening in this house.
I wish they were happening in more places.
like because even though and one of the things I noticed with and I had a chat with him about it was like he goes, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, is it that you don't know or that you're scared that you're going to get the wrong answer? Scared you're going to get the wrong answer. Okay, cool. I don't have an answer either. We can,
We can guess at answers.
yeah,
We
yeah.
don't have a truth, we have answers.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, because there isn't really a right answer because this is all theoretical.
This actually goes all the way back to William James and where this comes from with Descartes, etc. How do you how do you know you can trust your senses? Or you need to assume.
Yeah,
We make assumptions. The cognitive approach assumes indirect perception, and we need to do mental representations. We assume, we directly perceive. They are assumptions that we make. So whenever we're doing any sort of science to do with knowledge, empiricism, we learn from our experiences. Yes, but the knowledge that we have, we need to assume it's true
yeah.
in some way. We can't know for fact it's true unless it's a priori knowledge, in which case you're now going to go into epistemology and the study of what knowledge is. Good luck there.
I am nowhere now that fast than you can say.
Yeah, good luck going into that area of philosophy.
No,
But that's why we make assumptions.
yeah. It's nice to hear everyone asking questions because it's like when I first introduced the whole thing and started talking about it, it was no, we have memory, we store our memories. I'm like, yeah, what if we don't though? What if we don't? Because what about these things, specific examples of like when that doesn't make any sense?
Yep. The Gettier cases is a perfect example of where someone goes, yeah, but that doesn't work here, here, and or here. Justified true beliefs is where I'm getting Gettier cases from. If people are interested, epistemology, look up Gettier cases. But people were saying, oh, it's a justified true belief. Yeah, but the Gettier cases say otherwise. So when we're looking at any of our explanations about how we learn, how we remember, how we perceive, how we act, if there are cases where it doesn't match, then okay, we need to assess that. We need to address that. And when we're trying to explain something, we should actually get to an explanation, not just push back the cause along the line to this central executive that no one knows what it is, if it is a thing, which I don't think it is. And even the people that use the central executive in their models, they say, Mr. Bradley right now, working memory model man, he uses a central executive. I can't remember his first name, but Badley is his last name. He uses the central executive, but he says, well, that's a placeholder because we don't know what goes there. But people still say, oh, the central executive does the. Yeah, it's a placeholder. I feel like that's what I want to do.
This is the quote I was looking for. I learned that when a science does not usefully apply to practical problems, there is something wrong with the theory of the science.
Is that in Miguel's book?
Yeah. I'm just like that was Gibson, quoting JJ Gibson.
Ah, right.
Like,
I was going to say I recognize that quote, but
just like yes.
tweet it.
Oh yeah, let's tweet it. I'm gonna tweet it. I'm gonna tweet it. I'm gonna tweet it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to, as those that have listened to previous episodes. Oh, go for it.
Yeah. So another thing, I could not keep my mouth shut, which was fun because when I can't keep my mouth shut,
There's a good reason.
there's a good reason. I was online on Threads because I'm a cool kid.
Okay.
And someone was talking about coaching and how you have to have qualifications to be a non-scammy coach.
Bullshit.
And I replied, what do you mean? I believe that you need expertise in coaching to coach, but not official qualifications and training. Because why do I reply on freaking websites with a freaking word count? I hate it. Anyway, because I was like, because how could I train?
Pause for a sec. That is why you make content, so you just to said content.
True point, well made. How could I qualify as an ecological coach when I don't think there are any training? There is nothing. There is no way to train as an ecological coach. Is there a CLA training? Maybe.
Question your own question. There's no way to train as an ecological coach.
Well, no, because you can't train as an ecological coach because it's not techniques, is it? It's not techniques and strategies, which is what you're being taught to do. It's experience, which if we're talking about that, I got a PhD in that shit, you know, because it's true, because it's an experience. Because so no, you can't coach. Yeah.
But what you're getting to, like, fast forward a couple of steps here, unless you want to figure it out. Do you want to troubleshoot or?
Yeah, let's go. The frustration, because if I was to look into the trainings, I think the closest I would go would be a Gestalt approach, because that is to me
Rewind.
Oh, yeah, go.
Training.
Yeah.
When we look at training, what is training in ecological approach? What word do we typically
Practice.
use? Right. So when we're looking,
so when you're training to get a qualification, you're practicing. So why do you need a qualification? To practice, when really practice is practice. So all I need to do is practice, which by having clients, I'm practicing.
And developing expertise.
And developing expertise. And so I going back to the message I asked, and the response was basically, if you have expertise, you are a consultant, you are not a coach. And I'm like, no, you've assumed that expertise means knowledge of.
Qualification,
I'm
knowledge
talking
of.
about knowledge about. And I linked to a paper and didn't get a response, which was sad, because I'm like, this is really important, because yes, there are scammy coaches. There are people who are not coaches, but it doesn't. And I actually said, when I replied, I said, there are coaches who have taken qualifications who are shit. And they, and if, even if you look at the coach training, and I'm now constraining to the business coaching, because that's my experience of, like, most of them aren't coaches, they're teachers or instructors.
Oh, that's a jab in the teachers there.
That's nothing wrong with the teachers, instructors. They are giving instructions.
Yeah.
They are telling someone else what to do, rather than
You're you are literally the epitome of my degree right now. Like, when I was at university, sports coaching and teachers would fight constantly backwards and forwards, and you are on the coach's side right now, because teachers are all instruction because they need kids to behave in class. It's not true, because teachers do have the opportunity to do other things, but it's just easier to give instruction. And a lot of the time when you think of teachers, you think of them standing at the front going, right, we're going to do this now.
Yeah. And there are many teachers who are incredible that can coach, but it's so, yeah. And everyone's like, oh, well, if you, and some people are getting it of like, oh, you have to teach. If you're not teaching or or helping them learn a skill, then you are not coaching.
Because they need to acquire the skill for their brain to
acquire
remember.
the skill instead of
develop.
And I said, so that means that there is a, once you reach this level, and I was looking at the ICF certification, I'm like, yeah, but I'm not there. Like, you try and put me through that, I'm going to want to murder every single one of you, because you're going to try and tell me what to coach in a certain way, which is in complete antithesis to the philosophy.
There was an interesting conversation I had with a fencing coach recently. He's part of our little WhatsApp group. You may see some of this story in the recording that I sent you. But long story short, he has a young fencer, and he is national. He is amazing. He is beating people 5 years older than him. But he doesn't know the name of the moves. If a traditional coach says, "Oh, can you do a insert name of pokey thing with stick?" He'll, yeah, I don't know what they are. He'll go, "What's that?" You give him a drill, like a traditional fencing drill, to lunge forward to do what he's not sure. But you put him in a fight and a win. That's because he doesn't know the names of the things. He doesn't need to know the categories or the movements, and you need to put your wrist like this and your knee like that. No. He knows that if the person comes at him, he moves in one way to get a point. And if the person does the same thing slightly differently, he then just adapts his motor movements to get the point. And he'll get the points over and over, not because he knows the knowledge about, and it's just, oh, I now execute this motor program because I'm no, no. So when you're looking at the qualifications is you are now a robot that can answer the questions, which is why AI is so good at doing qualification, because you need to be a robot that's remembered all these things and stored it and then just execute command. But that's not the way the world works, which is why qualifications suck most of the time when it comes to actually assessing whether someone is competent at something or not.
Yeah.
And that's where expertise, developing expertise throughout time and throughout practice, for me, is more effective than coaching qualifications. However, we do need to standardize some level of practice, which, of course, comes with qualifications. That is where, as we were discussing last week, I think it was last week, the testing, I think, is useful for the individual to work out where they are. But I don't think we should use it as a they are good, they are not good. No, they are different.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that has been a back and forth I've had for quite a few years. Like, do I go get one? Like,
I mean, I'm in that situation at the moment with trampoline coaching. For those unfamiliar, in trampoline, in British gymnastics at least, to be able to coach, you need a level 1 to be able to assist another coach. That's £250. £250 in a 4, 5, 6 week potentially course, which shit. So it's £250 over, and call it 2 months to be able to assist another coach. Then you pay £550 for a level 2, plus another 2 months, probably 3 months to be honest, to be able to actually run a trampoline club. So that's almost £800 and 4 months worth of work just to coach the sport. Like, what? And once you've done your level 2, you can only teach certain skills. So for those unfamiliar with trampoline, you've got a front somersault, front flip, right? You can do that in a level 2. If you put a half twist in, you can do that in a level 2. If someone wants to do a full twist in it, you can't teach them that because you don't have your module 1. If you do a back somersault, you can teach that in a level 2, but if they want to put a half twist in it, you can't teach that because that's module 2. If someone wants to do a double front somersault, you can't teach that until you've done your module 4. So if someone wants to do a double back somersault, you have to have done level 2, module 4. So that's 1, 2, 3, and then 4. That's like £1,500 and like at least 2 years of coaching with mentoring with other people, etc. I'm like, what?
I've been looking into a similar thing for just like to be ICF certified. I am looking about £5,000.
It's crazy.
And I'm just like, but I have all this expertise already. And I am basically going to be told to
how
do
to do
exact,
it.
like how to do it, even though I know how to coach. There might be gaps in my, my expertise, which I could find myself.
So I tweeted this 18 hours ago. I was reading through the trampoline BG coach education stuff, and it says, I quote, your mentor will be someone to help you throughout the post-course activities and to support your development of gymnastic knowledge and the delivery methods such as the how to coach skills. Wait, so someone is going to tell me how to coach? What if I can already coach? What if I can already coach? Oh, wait, no, that's everyone. Everyone can already coach. So what does the how to coach mean? How to coach like me? Well, I don't want to be a robot. I don't want to coach like you. Now what are you going to do? Now how are you going to mentor me? But to get a qualification in BG, you need a mentor. So I'm going to have a person above me mentor me how to coach. We're like, what? And I mean, I don't know what the other sports are like, but this is a limitation within BG coaching qualifications. So taking any sort of approach, you have to get through the bureaucratic rubbish sometimes and just suck it up, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And pay, in some cases, quite literally, pay with your time and your money to do what it is that you want to do. I don't like it.
No. And I was looking at the ICF and I'm going, okay, but I'm gonna be so
I think in business you're okay. because you don't have the same sorts of responsibilities as a sports coach. Like I
Mm.
have a duty of care, so I need insurance. I can't just start up a trampoline club and say, "Hey, come and jump."
Oh yeah, I still do I need insurance? No. Should I have it? Yes, which I do have.
Yes, yeah.
Because
But it's all of those logistical sides of the coaching, the helping, the educating that it's
educating, no, a coach does not educate.
yes they do, everyone does.
No, a coach does not educate. Coach.
They educate. They also learn, believe it or not. This is actually something else that maybe is
Oh,
worth
oh, that's another one. A coach has to have a coach, or they're not a coach.
what?
Mm, you were
A coach needs to be coached, otherwise they're not a coach.
correct.
You don't need an educator. You are an educator and a learner. I'm lost.
Yeah, me too. Because
Okay. I'm glad we're lost together.
yeah, I was like, hang on a minute, but can I not coach myself? I mean, yes, if I need like sometimes having another person is helpful just to bounce ideas off of, and but also I could do that myself.
Mm, yeah.
That's
Why do you need to pay someone to coach you to do something? You can just learn. Like that's what everyone does. We are learners. We are self-organized systems that develop skills over time. I think that is probably a really interesting in for the business world. Because as I was discussing earlier about constraints, everyone has constraints, everyone uses constraints, but why you use them changes the approach that you take. The constraints-led approach, you add a constraint to try and encourage self-organization to emerge for developing skills.
mm,
Inside of business, why do you need a coach as a coach if the environment and you can self-organize in the environment is enough for you to develop skills?
you don't.
Exactly. I think that it's one of those dangerous things inside of business because a good effective coach makes themselves redundant.
Yes.
But if you make yourself redundant, you lose your income, which I think is what a lot of business owners don't like.
Yeah.
Like if you make yourself effective as a coach, you're making yourself redundant, and you're essentially making yourself or making yourself earn less money by making yourself redundant. But
That's
ethically and morally, and when you look at performance, that is what we want to do.
that's exactly what I aim to do. I want to make myself completely redundant because that's the point.
Hmm.
Because you won't need me forever.
I the way I like to set up my coaching sessions when I was coaching football was to set up the session, set up the task constraints, and basically let them play. Now it's not a hey, there's a ball, go play football thing. There were constraints, and if people struggle with whatever it was, then I would either add a constraint, remove a constraint. I would change the environment in some way. So I'm not just standing back and go right, do your thing. I'm manipulating the environment to help guide individuals self-organize to develop skills. But me being able to just step back and become somewhat redundant is effective. And a trampoline specific example here I was talking about yesterday to one of the coaches I was discussing with. There was a girl I used to coach. Well, I started trampolining and I was helping my sister out, and the other person that was on our trampoline, she was sort of there. And she said, "Oh, can you help me?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." And she did a skill. She stopped. She turned and looked at me. And this is the first conversation that I'd had with her, and well, about the coaching thing. And I said to her, "What do you want?" And she said, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, you're looking at me. What do you want?" "Well, you're meant to be coaching me." I'm like, "Yeah, but what do you want me to say?" "Well, I don't know." And then she mentioned the other coaches. They normally say this and say that and tell me this. I'm like, "Yeah, but why would I tell you what to do? You're the one doing it." She's like, "Well, how are you going to coach me then if you're not going to tell me what to do?" I'm like, "Okay, do the skill again." So she was doing a Barani at the time, front somersault with a half twist. I said, "Oh, okay, was that the same as the last one?" "Well, no." "Well, how is it different?" "Well, I didn't land in the same place." "Okay, why didn't you land in the same place?" "Well, I don't know. Figure it out." So she did another one. And she's like, "That one went forwards, but I don't know why." I'm like, "Okay, figure it out." So the whole go was her exploring her movement and actually educating her attention to her body. When she got off, the skill hadn't improved, but her ability to coach herself had drastically improved. So I was making myself redundant as a coach by helping her educate her attention to herself. Now, was I still useful? Yes, because I'm giving feedback. I'm asking her questions. I'm constraining the environment for her to explore whatever the skills are that she wants to develop. How you do that in business is obviously your area, your field. But that to me, I'm like, okay, now I'm helping the individual become a learner, a more
Yeah.
effective learner.
Yeah. A lot of the kind of, I suppose, trying to put it into business. Gosh, so many. The direction in business is so interesting because it's very much like there are so many options of what you can explore and talk about. I suppose the same as with trampolining.
Well,
There's so
anything.
with everything.
It's human behavior, isn't it?
Yeah. And often what we kind of focus on when I'm coaching a client is often I'm just like, so where you at? Is my first question. And which is the correct answer? I'm like, oh, this and that. I'm like, I don't know.
That's the thing. If you leave it open, then they typically, when I say they, clients, participants, athletes, whoever, will start where they are thinking at that time. Like the most immediate thing to them, the thing that is bubbling at the top right now, will likely be their first answer. Is that the most potent answer? Often not the case, but it gets them thinking about what it is that they're doing, and they're attuning their attention to important pieces of information and actions they've been doing recently. And through that exploration can emerge problems, solutions, ideas, and things worth exploring.
Mm,
So you've just created an environment by asking a very simple question: where are you at? And having the time to listen.
yeah. Yeah.
That's why just talking with people is beneficial, which is why we do the podcast, which is
Yeah.
why I do the podcast.
Oh yeah. Same.
But,
Cool. It's fun.
yeah, I want to talk with someone else about these ideas and see what emerges throughout the conversations.
And those emerged today.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Is there anything else specifically you want to mention or bring up?
I don't think so.
Okay, because I wanna discuss something that I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about the ecological approach and instructional design. Yeah, and I tweet again. I tweeted about this. If you don't follow me on Twitter, sorry, X. But yeah, I tweeted about this, and they were saying that they don't always take the ecological approach because they do isolated practice. And I'm like, yeah, but isolated practice can still be ecologically driven
Yeah.
because it's just a heavily constrained environment.
Yeah.
And this is where I think there's a huge misconception with what the ecological approach is. I feel like people inside of sport, anyway, are saying ecological approach equals teaching games for understanding. You need to be representative game design. No, that's not what the ecological approach is. That's what teaching games for understanding is. Isolated practice isn't instructional design. Isolated practice is heavily constrained practice. So the reason why you do the things is the approach that you're taking, ecological approach or to traditionally instructional design. I mean, the way I explain it through a lot of the words that I use is you have practice design or instructional design. But that isn't entirely accurate because in ecological approaches, you still have instructional design to elicit task constraints. So it's not an
Yeah. I was
all-encompassing
thinking about that as I was kind of like thinking of
thinking.
a coaching example. Of like, because sometimes I do go, okay, cool. So what about this? And like, and they're like, oh, what do I do about this? And I can just, and I'm like, okay, what do you think? And they're just like lost.
Mm,
And I'm like, okay, what about this? And there is that instructional element in
mm.
there because obviously I have skills and expertise in the practical running of a business that maybe someone else does not, that they're not attuned to. And I'm like, okay, cool. So how does this work? And they go and do the thing and they go, oh, it didn't work. Okay, cool. Why?
Yeah, but that's it. A coach's instruction is a task constraint.
Yeah.
That-
Just something that I got to just through hearing what you were saying. Like it's a task constraint.
mm.
So in terms of the coach shouldn't tell someone else what to do.
But that's it. That's different.
Yeah.
Telling someone what to do and giving a task constraint are different. They're different purposes, and that's where when you look at the constraints-led approach and using constraints, they're different. You can
Mm.
pass. You have to pass the ball against the wall.
Oh
That's a
yeah, you have to, or you could.
Exactly. That's a
And
constraint.
it's such a small change, which goes back to the whole like, oh, what's the difference between you must to you could?
It's a language shift, explanation
Mm,
shift, but one of them constrains action so
mm.
much so it doesn't allow much for exploration and self-organization. And if self-organization is constrained to the point at which very few things can emerge, it's highly isolated. Is that effective for highly dynamic environments? No.
And
If
business and most things is a highly dynamic environment, which is why
exactly.
really I'm so fucking sick of people saying just do one thing.
In math, 1 add 1 equals 2. Isolated, highly constrained, it's beneficial. Yes. But when you add some dynamic elements to that environment, maybe add another symbol. So you got 1/2 or 1 point, who knows what numbers. Well, now 1 add 1 doesn't equal 2. Now you need to understand the interactions between those elements. In cognitive load theory, that's element interactivity, but that's so broad that it's useless. But inside of ecological dynamics, you're now looking to explore the opportunities of those symbols with varying affordances, obviously perceived through your understanding and depth of developed skills. But that can emerge through the environment. So you have isolated practice, 1 add 1 equals 2, 1 add 1 equals 2. Then you reduce or you add some constraints or you reduce some constraints to say, okay, what does one add all of these single digit numbers, one add all of the double digit numbers, so 100s, 200s, 300s, one add, now we've got fractions, now we've got decimals, now we've got, well, you don't have one on the side, we have both 2-digit numbers, both 3-digit numbers. This is obvious. It happens in math lessons. It's what you do. It's progression, desirable difficulty. But when you look at those numbers, can you do it a different way? Well, I've got 3 juggling balls. That's still a single digit number. But if you say, okay, I want you to do 1 add 2, that equals 3. They're right on a page. And then if you say, okay, I want how many juggling balls do I have on the table? They look at it and go, I don't know, to start with, because it's not 1 add 2, it's just 3. So they've learned the isolated skill of 1 add 2 equals 3, but they haven't learned the holistic mathematical skill of counting.
Yeah, I remember that Aiden used to really struggle with that. Like it was going to the word problems as such versus just the numbers. The numbers, fine. Word problems, no.
Because they've learned in isolated environments, which is why when at schools they do GCSE and A-level maths test, they're like, oh, we're going to do some exam preparation today because you need to learn how the exams write the questions. Why in the world did you teach them in a way that doesn't match the test? That's not representative practice design. That's instructional design and isolated constrained practice. And that is the small differences between an ecological approach and a traditional cognitive approach. If you're teaching 1 add 1 on paper, that doesn't necessarily teach mathematical understanding.
Yep.
And and that's how you can apply an ecological approach to maths. I shared a conversation recently on Twitter. It's a 20-minute conversation with someone talking about
Yeah.
ecological approach to mathematics teaching, and I'm hopefully going to be speaking with them in a couple of weeks. So that should be fun. But yeah, so the ecological approach isn't just sport. It isn't just business. It is everything because it's a behavior and it's a way, a language, and an explanation on how to learn different things, which means everyone does it.
But you've got to stay in your lane. You can't talk about anything else. You can only talk about business if you're a business coach.
Everything's business. Everything is business. I would love to have debates with people from the other side, but not there yet. Not there yet. Right. I don't have anything else that I would like to add today. Is there anything else you would like to add, John?
Nope, I'm good.
Right. Well, see you all next week. Well, we won't see you, but speak to you all next week.